Afternoon, folks. Got another fragrance review coming at you today with a little Paris Corner special. This is Celestial. This is supposed to be a Ganymede clone. Now, I've never smelled Ganymede. And, you know, some folks might say, well, how are you going to do a video about a clone if you've never smelled the original, right? Well, I'm not here to tell you whether this is an exact dupe. What I encourage you to do is check out some of the other YouTubers who do have Ganymede. I always recommend Cubano, or Cubano, or however the hell you say his channel's name. He's a pretty well-versed guy when it comes to the world of fragrances. Another guy I really like to trust, or I do trust, is Redolessence. But remember, at the end of the day, fragrances is super subjective. I read, before I buy a fragrance, right, what do I look for mainly? It's going to be the price. You know, I don't want to spend a lot of money. I really enjoy the cheapies. Naturally, if you have a very expensive, if you have this counterpart, the real deal, Ganymede, I'm sure it's going to be better quality, right? But at the end of the day, I don't really see much of a difference. You either like the way something smells or you don't. My biggest complaint with some of the cheaper stuff, and again, it is really hit or miss, is the longevity and the projection, right? Overall, it's still, most fragrances you buy still smell great. And I guess it really comes down to how open-minded you are, and of course, personal taste. Not everybody's gonna like everything, so I don't think they're really, like you folks know, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. You know, you guys know, there's no one shoe fits all for fragrances. There's, what one person smells, another one may not. I kind of dumb it down to the most simple reasoning when I get something. I really like to blind buy fragrances. Of course, I do research them a little bit beforehand. And I don't mean research like I really dig in. I mean, I look at what other people say. If, you know, most people say a fragrance is worth having. Again, that is totally subjective, but when you look at folks, I guess if you find a couple YouTubers who review fragrances and you tend to like their assessments, and some are a little more difficult, like Redolessence, he's a guy who really, you know, he likes everything, right? And I'm very similar to that. When you look at Cubano, there are ones he does like and doesn't like. And again, I can't, you know, most of them he does. He was going to give you an honest assessment. But I kind of tend to, I guess if you have fragrances that your favorite YouTuber likes and has recommended, and you took that chance on blind buying something, and you get it, and you're like, if you look at the way they react, and they're like, man, this is unbelievable, it's like one of their favorite scents, as Cubano says he gets goose pimples, right? I kind of figure when he likes something, because we kind of share similar tastes, that most likely I'm going to like it. And again, it's really hit or miss. You know, sometimes you may get a fragrance that smells like something else you have. So my point is you know, take every fragrance review with a grain of salt. I'm just going to give you guys my take on this and what I get, and whether I like it or not, and do I think it's worth it. Reading Fragrantica, reading reviews, ultimately, no matter how much you try to prepare for a fragrance, you're just never going to get, it's almost meaningless, right? You can kind of look at the notes on something and say, hey, I like, for instance, this has a blend of saffron, suede, violet leaf, mandarin, Chinese osmanthus, akigala wood, and I think that's it, right? And again, a lot of times with these Paris Corner fragrances, I can't always find the notes, right? So I'm kind of going, this is coming off Perfume Oriental. I mean, if you really want to dig in, you could probably find somewhere online that has the exact notes. But basically, this is meant to be, again, a clone of Ganymede. And that's by Marc, and I think it's Marc Antone. What the hell's his name? Marc Antone. I guess the fragrance house is Marc Antone Barrios. But the perfumer on Ganymede is Quentin Biche. I think I'm saying that right. Again, remember, I'm kind of a novice with fragrances. You know, I have like 300. You know, I'm not a professional. You know, I can't make creations. I can only give you my assessment on what I smell with this. So we're just going to go off, because this is a clone of Ganymede, we're just going to go off kind of like the main accords they say on Fragrantica. So I think overwhelmingly most people state this is a very mineralic, if that's even a word, scent. It's got, if I like to pick the top three when it comes to kind of the note breakdown or the main accords. This says mineral, warm, spicy, and leather. They do list oud, ozonic, woody, citrus, fruity, aquatic, but I think it's really hard to kind of lump a fragrance into that many different accords. What is the main vibe you get from this? And it's an interesting scent. I definitely get the ozonic and kind of mineral-like comparison. But, you know, that's kind of hard to describe to somebody. Like, what does mineralic mean, you know? You'd have to give me more of an example on what like mineralic would be. Does that mean walking into a cave with, you know, rich minerals? I'm just not really sure how you make that designation for a fragrance. I mean, I think we can all get like the warm spicy if you have notes like pepper and cinnamon, and you know, there's many different notes that can make something spicy and warm. I think the easiest way to break a fragrance down is whether it's a freshie or whether it's more daring, whether it's earthy or warm spicy. I think when we think of, if you think of warm spicy fragrances, and again, you guys probably have more knowledge than I do on this stuff, but for me, when I think of what do I consider warm spicy, I think of fragrances like 1 Million. There's a creaminess, there's a warmth to it. When you think of gourmand, you think of fragrances that you might want to like eat, something that you like, kind of sweets, you know what I mean? Leathery, we all know what leather smells like. And I think leather is a really good designation or classification of a fragrance because we all know what you know, leather smells like. You've all smelled the leather jacket, nice leather car interior, although car interior is kind of a bad, I guess really a bad example because I don't really get a lot of leather smell out of car interior. I mainly get it from a leather jacket, or if you walk into like a western wear store and you have like leather saddles, where you get that heavy leathery kind of scent. Pick up a a brand new Western leather belt, you have that nice leather scent. And so I think we all know what that is. Oud is very easy because if you smell oud, you can kind of pinpoint what oud is. Oud is it can be skanky or it can be more user friendly, we'll call it. And then woody, you know, wood, oak, cedar. I think citrusy, fruities, aquatics, these are easier designations. When we get into things like mineralic, that's hard for me to kind of to kind of, I guess, pinpoint something that the general population has smelled, which would be considered mineralic. But I do understand when I smell this, I get it, even though I can't really understand it. It does have kind of an odd ozonic slash mineralic quality. I see how that relates, even if I can't explain that correctly. Does that kind of make sense? As far as this being like a warm, spicy fragrance, I don't consider this warm, spicy. This is kind of an exotic fragrance to me. I don't have anything that smells like it. It doesn't have that barbershop kind of vibe. It doesn't have that freshy kind of vibe. But if I have to kind of like think of what does this bring to mind, I do kind of picture a dated scent, right? And I can't specifically pick a fragrance that I've smelled in the past, but it has like a little bit of a muskiness to it, although very minor. It definitely has, I don't want to say freshy kind of scent, but more of a, I'd say, a safer summer fragrance. Fall, winter, absolutely. I think this is a year-round fragrance. Whereas, you know, I've always said you can wear fragrances whenever you want, but I do think there are some fragrances that would be a very cloying in the hot, sticky summertime. You know what I mean? So, again, you can always wear what you want. I do understand that this does have kind of a fruitiness to it. I get that, and I know I said I was going to pick the top 3, but it does, to me, kind of have that ozonic, kind of slightly fresh, but mildly spicy, just a little tiny bit. It's very unique. It's not going to be your typical like Nautica Voyage, your freshy scent. It has a very sophisticated scent to it that I kind of picture, if you have to picture a person in your head, is just kind of like a more of an older guy, you know. Not something that smells like, you know, what you might think your grandfather or father smells like, and these are very loose kind of ideas on what, you know, what this might remind you of, but I definitely picture an older guy wearing this, you know, which is, you know, I mean, again, anybody can wear it, but it is a very unique scent. Of my 300 fragrances, I don't have anything that smells like this. I do get the vibes, though, if you've ever smelled a fragrance like, and there's no comparison here, just so you know, but there is kind of a comparison. No comparison, but comparison. There is kind of like something that reminds me of like Dirty English or English Laundry, the gold one, where it has like this kind of, it's not a barbershop vibe, but it has kind of like this masculine, dated kind of guy. If that makes sense. I know that was a terrible way of describing it, but if we look at what Fragrantica does say, and I like to use these kind of notes on here. Again, mineral notes, suede, saffron, Akigala wood, violet leaf, mandarin, Immortelle and Chinese Osmanthus. I've never smelled a lot of those notes individually. I think that's what makes it very difficult for the average perfume or fragrance reviewer, because you're just going to kind of get your impression, and it doesn't remind me of anything. And it doesn't. When I look at all the different fragrances I've smelled over the years and what's in my collection, I can't really say that this is one that I'm like, ooh, man, this reminds me of this. Whereas fragrances like, Zaharoff Signature Rose kind of reminds me of like Frank Olivier, their Oud Vanille. So there are some comparisons between fragrances sometimes when you look at fragrances. And sometimes they're not necessarily clones. They're just fragrances that kind of might have a majority of, like if you had a fragrance that was based on mainly like Italian Mandarin, as if the concentration is a lot higher in that one note, that might remind you to something you have in your collection that was heavy on Mandarin. So it's a very difficult thing to describe to people. I'm not going to paint you a story as far as how this opens and how this dries down. It's a great scent, but like most scents in the $25 price range, they're fantastic right when you put them on, and they dry down and tend to fizzle away rather quickly. These are kind of fragrances that you could definitely go heavy on the trigger. I would probably go with something like this, if I was going out, 10, 15 sprays on it. But it's a fantastic fragrance. I mean, it's a very cool bottle. Very strange, very different. Got the gold eagle on it. I don't get too involved in the cap and the sprayer. As long as the juice comes out, I'm cool with it. And it's another one for the collection. But it is a great scent, and I don't think this is something that you'll see some fragrance reviewers say, oh, well, this is an easy reach or a simple blind buy. I just don't think that I believe that really with anything. I think that when you buy a fragrance, if you haven't had your nose on it, you might say that I like leather, right? So I don't mind, I do like leathery fragrances. So generally, I find that pretty safe. But again, with me, I'm so open-minded that there's not really any fragrances I would get where I'm going to be like, oh, and turned off by. Like, I don't. Sometimes these folks review these things, like just in the comment section, they're like super synthetic. It's like that word is tossed around so loosely. I don't really understand it. And it's not because I haven't smelled expensive fragrances. I smelled the Creed Aventuses. I've smelled, again, I don't have a lot of these, but I've had Penhaligons, and I have fragrances in that, $150 to $200 price range, whether they're samples or full bottles. And there is an element of quality that you get with spending more a lot of times. The concentration's higher. It lasts longer. If you look at fragrances by like one of my favorite houses, but I don't have any full bottles, but Stevens brand, or who he collaborates with, I'm not sure how that works, but Navitus is just, you could spray 2-3 sprays and it'll be on your clothes for days. Whereas like you have fragrances that sometimes are, $20 by arm off. Well, I can smell it for months on my clothes afterwards. So price does not dictate the longevity and projection and how long these fragrances are going to last. It really is hit or miss. And when you're buying fragrances in this price point, when you're spending $224 on Ganymede, you better like it, and it better last. It better meet up to your expectations. When you're spending, $19 to $25 on a fragrance, your expectations are lower as far as those things. And it's just a lot of fun to be able to add stuff like this to your collection. But I think if you're looking for something that is very unique, it has there definitely is that kind of like mildly fruitiness to it, but it's not. I'm surprised when I look at like just Ganymede, when you look at, and again, this isn't Ganymede, but when you look at what this is, supposed to be a clone of, I would not get that this was as fruity as it is. And it's not fruity where it's like overly sweet. It just has a mild fruitiness to it where you smell just kind of, I don't know, I can picture myself walking on the beach wearing this. Even though it's not, I don't consider it an overly summery, fruity, cool beach fragrance, but it just kind of has that vibe where I think you're wearing something like this, you're definitely going to smell interesting to people. I think you will get compliments on it, but ultimately you got to wear fragrances for you. And if you get a compliment, hey, that's a bonus. But I think that this is a great opportunity that if you are thinking about buying Ganymede and you don't live in an area where you can go scent it or get your nose on it, then you can buy a clone like this. And clones are either for folks who don't want to spend a lot of money and kind of get that vibe, or for folks who just, again, might want to just get their nose on what Ganymede might smell like. Again, from what like Cubano says, that there is a difference, but it puts you in the space of that. And I think it's safe to say that if you get this and you're like, oh, I absolutely love this, you get Ganymede, you're probably going to love that even more, right? So, you know, for me, definitely a winner. I think it's definitely something I would, once the bottle's gone, I'll probably add it to my collection again if the price is right. But I would give this a look. Check out other YouTubers, see what they have to say about it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you really just have to make your own decision. I don't get that this is an overly like leathery fragrance. If I were to smell this, I would say that it definitely has kind of a leathery quality, absolutely. But it's more of like a fruity, mineralic leather, and it's pretty cool. And don't, like when I say that, don't think of like Tom Ford Tuscan leather. That's like a very heavy raspberry, dense, leathery scent. This is definitely, I think, a safer, sexy kind of leather, and I absolutely love it. So it's a great fragrance. Check it out. If I can help in any way, let me know. I'll do my best. But ultimately, you got to make your own decision. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Link is in the description, and take care.